This week what we're going to concentrate on is continuing this look and this shape all the way through and around and back into itself. We're going to fill up all these little holes. The original roof liner sat and was screwed to here, so none of this was visible. Here's a photo of the original truck ceiling liner. As you can see, it's not going to be particularly difficult for us to achieve something that looks better than that. You can also see there's a big rubber seal that goes around the inside of the door that holds that liner up, so we're not going to be using that. What we need to do is we need to put body filler, what we call bog, on this. It just needs a light skim to shape it and make it look good. But what I'm really aware of is that I don't want any seepage of anything of rust, or this truck was acid dipped and I'm just worried that there's acid trapped in there. So I'm going to fully seam weld all these joins, and it's not really to strengthen it, although it will. Most of the reason is, 100% of the reason for me, is so that when we put body filler on here, it won't crack. We plan on bringing this in a curve, so it'll curve that way, all the way along, and join it back into that rear part. I've made up this piece of sheet metal through here, and we've put a curve on it and bent it this way as well. So effectively what I did was I rolled this over a piece of tube, and then I literally hammer on dolly stretched all these areas through here to give it that curve. I've also gone through and welded up all those sections like I discussed, and I spent a lot of time trying to get the shape right, or the transition from here into here right. And now I've put some filler on it. I've looked at it and just decided that this is just too thick through here. Now is probably the best time to do something about it. I want to take a bit of this bulk out. If you look at the section through here, I want to make the section above the door at least be close to that bulk. So I think that's my next little project, is cut this out and rebuild the top of this. Probably realise now that ergonomics and trying to think as far ahead as possible is one of our big, well, what we aim to be our strong point. And when I first sat in this cab, and it had its steering wheel in it and it had the pedals in it and the original bench seat, it was a really horrible driving position. So what I have put a huge amount of effort into right from the very, very start of this truck was to work out how to get a modern car ergonomic seating position into an old truck. And the way I went about doing it was I drive an old E39 BMW, and I find that seating position and the position of the pedals and steering wheel and all the ergonomics of it just absolutely fantastic. So I made up a wooden frame that mimicked my exact driving position in that car, and I sat that frame into this cab and then started cutting because absolutely nothing would work. So I've ended up cutting the whole inner lower floor out. I mean, I had to do that anyway because it was gone through rust. But what we've gained from basically designing the seating position from the very start is a really decent, proper seating position that you would not normally get. One of the big changes that we've made to the cab is that we've moved the front axle forward about 150 mil to allow us to have this seating position. What we've used here is a steering column out of a car called a Toyota Century, which is what our engine transmission came from. And it's all electric driven, so we're going to set it up with the PDM, so when you turn the ignition off, the steering wheel will raise about 75 mil. It will raise and it'll also move forward as we're getting in and out. And the complete reverse as we get in. As soon as we're in the car and we turn the ignition on, then it'll come back into the position that we set it at. Notice that our switch panel that we've just finished building is within really easy reach. The more I get into this interior sheet metal work, the more I realise how beneficial it is to have the roof off to actually get to the stuff. So what we've got here is this internal piece of sheet metal here, but it's absolutely riddled with rust. It looks kind of okay, but it's just not. A friend of mine came over yesterday and we sat and had a fairly lengthy discussion and brainstorm on what we thought this area should look like. What I don't want to do is have a big flat panel here that's just covered in leather. You know, big flat areas aren't what this truck is. One of the things that we came up with was that this roof console shape would look really cool if it started up here and came into a center console here. What we're thinking of is starting it from up on this piece of sheet metal, which we need to remove and replace anyway, and bring it down in front of the part of the roll cage structure and curve it to match the seat. What we're planning on doing is bringing this piece of sheet metal down and curving around here and into the tunnel, and it would all be the same piece of sheet metal as this. And as we've got these radiuses up the top here, we would then bring these radiuses into this. So this would all be painted same colour as the outside of the truck, and it'll come down here and morph into the centre console. For those of you who have watched our first couple of videos that we've put out, you'll know that we've been working on an Oldsmobile, and we've got it undercover at the moment because we've kind of put it on the slow go, but mainly because we don't have enough staff resource to work on it and go full send on the Corvettes. The owner of the car was completely happy with us putting it on go slow because he's going to assemble the chassis and get the whole running gear and engine and all that sort of thing back onto the chassis. We'll just show you what we have done. As you guys have seen from some of our past footage, the whole front section of both the original car and the donor car were effectively a write-off. We had enough parts of that to actually fully understand where the bead rolls go and where all the shapes and what the shape of the part was. And so we've had a mate of ours, Tony, do an awesome job of building new floor pans. Still need scribing, they're still a little bit too big. We'll scribe them into fit and then we'll weld them fully through here. What we've done is we've cut this part of the floor pan, which we're going to keep, exactly halfway over the top of the cross member, and so you can see where the spot welds were. What we'll do is we'll fully weld this piece all the way through here, then we can dress it off and then we can probably just put the odd spot weld in, and you'll never know that it's been replaced. And in the front here we'll simply spot weld it back on using the original spot weld locations and probably add a few more. We've got two of these, one for each side, and there's still the midsection of the tunnel from one of the, I think it's from the donor car, is still usable, so that's ready to go in. This is the original floor pan under where the back seats went from it, and we are going to use most of what you can see here. We've got replacement cross member frames that are actually already in that part of the floor pan inside the car. What Tony's done is he's cut these parts out and replicated them, and he's done an amazing job of these too. So again, they need to be scribed in, but he's now built a new set of floors, and they're pretty much all ready to scribe in. What we'll do though is we will fit this into the car, and we won't fully weld it in, but we'll certainly clamp it in, and at that point we'll then scribe this to fit, and we may actually even just fully weld this in before we fit them, but we'll work out the order as we go. One of the other jobs we have to do is go through and locate where all these rubber bungs were, and Tony's allowed for those in these flat areas here, and so we'll go through and drill these out as well before we put some paint on. In New Zealand, we're not allowed to rust repair or repair cars unless we get a certifier involved, and a certifier has to come at certain intervals and basically agree with how we're going to go about fixing it, and then he comes and watches us and checks that we've fixed it how we've agreed on. One of the little milestones that we got to was he came a couple of months ago and said for us to get him back once the sills had been welded in and before we weld the floors in. And so he came back a couple of weeks ago and was completely happy with it. The type of things he checks are, for example, we plug welded the inner sill in from the inside, and he's checking things like, have you got penetration through to this side? And we have to leave those types of things unpainted for him. And he's come along and looked at it and given us the green light to continue. Where we're at now is working out what to do next, and whilst it seems a little bit out of order, what we are going to do is fit an air conditioning system in here. We're going to use a vintage air system, and the reason why we're doing it now is because when the floor's completely missing, we've got very, very easy access to under there. As far as I'm aware, we can't buy kits for this exact car. We've had to buy a generic kit, and so none of the brackets and none of the vents or anything really are going to be usable. And so having access underneath the dash without having to lie in there and grovel around and try and do it is pretty advantageous. So that is the next task, is fit all that. We've got it and got it in stock. Probably in about a month's time we'll get back into that. This is the progress that the owner and his brother have been making on the Oldsmobile chassis. They're quite handy and they enjoy putting the car together. So the plan is that I do all the actual sheet metal repair and all the welding and all the painting, and then they are going to come through and then assemble everything on the car. So the last couple of weeks they've been full speed at it, and they've got all the front suspension in. So the front suspension's in as well as the sway bar, and it's all been sandblasted, epoxy painted, and all the rubber bushes have been replaced, and it's got new ball joints upper and lower. So it's all good for pretty much going back in the car. So these are the brake drums that have been reconditioned. They've been checked for trueness and also within tolerance for wear, and they were all good. And so they've just been sandblasted and epoxy painted, and like all the other parts, are literally ready to go back on. What we've done with this chassis before they started reassembling it was we had the thing sandblasted and epoxy coated, And then what we did was we put it on we just suspected that it wasn't true and square, so we put it on a chassis machine and it wasn't. And so it's been pulled back into shape, and once we were happy with that, we brought it back here, touched up the epoxy on it, and then we put an underbody, textured underbody sealer on it. In our last video, we hinted that we had another project. So what we're doing in this video is just giving a really quick basic introduction of it. And next week's video is going to be a full-on explanation and pretty much a run through of everything we're going to be doing. This car is not a customer's car, it's Hunter's. He's one of the guys that works here. It's his pet project. So we'll hand him over to you guys for an explanation of what it is and what he's planning on doing on it.
Hi guys, my name is Hunter, and as Matt said, I'm the other guy that works here. And yeah, this is my car. It's a 1980, or it was a 1980 Porsche 924. So it was like the narrow body 944 that everybody knows. It was the less loved car. And about a year and a half ago, we picked it up from a scrap metal yard up in Whangarei and brought it back here, and we haven't done a ton to it, so it's a good time to introduce it to you guys. The plan with this car is to build it as light as possible, so we're putting a full carbon fibre body on it, and the motor will be a 5-cylinder turbo motor, and it should be about 500 horsepower when finished. Next episode we'll do a full rundown on the car and we'll explain everything that we understand so far. But that's it for this week, so thank you very much for watching, and please like and subscribe if you can. It means a lot to the channel, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week.